I have got a great story for you today. It's one of those things that I often think back whenever I'm feeling down or blue, when I need a reminder that God works all things together for the good of those who love Him and are called according to His purposes. Hey there, I'm Tabitha Filan, the author behind MeetPenny.com, and your hostess with the mostest for Carline Conversations. I'm really happy to share this story with you, and I hope that just me spending a few minutes reflecting will also help you think back on things that you can remember God doing in your life. All right, so as with any good story, it starts in a really rotten place. Okay, so I grew up with an association to a church that, well, I'll be real honest. My grandfathers, like one of my grandfathers was the first pastor, and one of my grandfathers was not the first pastor, excuse me. One of my grandfathers was the fourth pastor the church ever had, and one of the other grandfather, two on that side, the other grandfather was one of the first deacons, and deacon's son met pastor's daughter, and they literally eloped. So I think the way the old story goes, they were married for 2 weeks before their parents found out, and the only way their parents found out was one of them saw them kissing, and ooh, you weren't supposed to do that, and they were married. So it's a crazy story, but so I have deep ties to this particular church, and I spent most of my teenage years there, and ended up going to college and majoring in religion, working part-time at this church, and just the whole time feeling like that's where I was supposed to serve God in a full-time capacity. So I really felt that I was being called to ministry, specifically children's ministry, and I was working during the summer, with the summer program, planning it. I mean, because we didn't have a children's minister, and so I did all the planning and all the executing, and I was essentially the children's director, but not for the pay that you would expect. That's not the point right now. Anyway, so when I graduated college, like leading up to graduation of college, the Minister of Education is telling me, yeah, we really need to do a full-time position, and I'm going to go to this committee, and we're going to talk about it. And so he's like, would you write the job description for this position so I have something to take them? Sure, yeah. So I write out a job description, and I take it, and he tweaks it, and he's showing me articles in major magazines saying, oh, this is the pay that is recommended for this type of job. And so he takes it to the committee, and he comes back, and so the position is created. Not for me. The position's creative. It was political. Okay. Anyway, half the recommended pay. So that position got approved. And then once the position was approved and I graduated college, it was offered to me, and I was hired. No one else applied. I was hired into that job. I was working full-time for part-time pay, and it was awesome to be in that position, to be in a church where I had such a rich heritage. And it was also extremely difficult because I did not realize what was going on behind the scenes. And it was my very first ministry job, so I didn't have anything to reference, to compare it to. So anyway, the pastor would not allow me to actually speak directly to him. I had to go through the Minister of Education, who would take everything to the pastor for me. And I thought that was normal. I didn't realize that was weird. And the message started coming back to me, through that grapevine we had, that the pastor was going to be encouraging me to go to seminary. And the minister of education, who was also a seminary graduate, was encouraging me, and they would say things like, or he would say things like, well, no one's ever going to take you seriously as a woman in ministry unless you go to seminary. And I thought, oh yeah, that's true. I swallowed that as true. And after a lot of pressure, I was praying about it. I never really felt called to go to seminary, but I felt so much pressure to go. And I had a lot of friends having gone to a Christian college who were also going to seminary. And I was seeing how their churches were supporting them, how this very church that I was on staff at was lending financial support to them. So I thought, well, maybe I should just do this. And it was with the understanding that whenever I got out of seminary, hopefully I could come back to that job. Well, I go out to seminary and come to find out the pastor hired his wife and doubled her pay. See, so, okay, it was difficult. It was extremely painful. There is no hurt like church hurt. And so I was stuck in another state, going to seminary, extremely depressed. I was working 3 jobs and going to school time and a half, over full time. And within 9 months, I had half of my degree, but I was so burned out and so wounded and just could barely function. And then my great grandmother passed away. And that was kind of like the moment where everything just broke inside of me, because I had to fly home. I didn't have any money to fly home. I scraped together just enough to get a plane ticket, and I came home for her funeral at that church, and no one on the staff really spoke to me. Of course, it's probably a blessing that they didn't, because I was definitely not in the headspace to be able to think rationally at that point either. So I went back after the funeral and continued going to school for a couple of months, and then I just finally called my mom one day and said, I'm coming home. I quit. I can't do this here. So I moved home, and I was determined that I was never going to church again. I was just done. And living at home, my dad came to my bedroom door one day and he said, hey, there's this new church that I passed by the other day. And, if you're living in my house, you're going to church on Sunday. You live in my house, you'll live by my rules, that kind of thing. And I didn't fuss. I was like, okay, Dad said, if I'm living here, I got to go to church on Sundays. Might as well go with them. So we went to a church we'd never visited before, and I really loved it. It was such a healing time for me to just kind of get to know who I was. I met some really good friends there. And one Sunday, this guy gets up on the stage. He comes in and he's playing his saxophone as a guest. And I'm looking at him thinking, I know him from somewhere. I can't figure out where it is. Well, come to find out, he's looking at me from the stage thinking the same thing. And of course, he ends up being my husband. I mean, he wasn't my husband then, but he went off and he traveled with Truth, if you're familiar with that group, and did their Christmas tour. So he was gone for a while, but then after he was finished with that, he came back to our church and started attending our church and asked me out. And I can't help but think that if I had not gone through what was one of the most difficult and disappointing times of my life, that I would have missed out on my husband. That if I hadn't, gone through all of those really tough days that brought me back and put me in a different church. Here's the crazy thing too. My husband and I, when we went to the same college, graduated the same day, in the same service, same ceremony. We had all the same friends at college, but had never met one another. So yeah, he looked familiar to me. I saw him every day. It was a small school. It's not a giant school. It was a small Christian college. So it's just crazy that God had to take me out of where I was in my comfort zone, so to speak, and break me, and then bring me back to help me meet my husband. So that's one of the things when I'm going through a really difficult time, I can reflect on that and think, yeah, that was uncomfortable. I don't ever want to have to live through days like I did back then. But something really good came from it. No matter what you're going through today, just know that God can and will work it all together. Think about what He's done for you before. Think about those moments and focus on those moments and trust that if He did it then, He can do it again. If He's doing it for others, He can do it for you. That's it. I hope I get to share more stories with you in the future, because that's not the only one. And if you've got a great God story, a time when God worked all things together for your good, I'd love to know it. Tell me in the comments. And I'll see you tomorrow in the Carline.